Hi there, and welcome to video 20 of the Flipped History series. In this video, there are 4 learning intentions. The first learning intention is to indicate the factors that contribute to migration. The success criteria is, I can describe why groups migrated to Canada. The second learning intention is to indicate the measures taken by the Canadian government regarding immigration. The success criteria is, I can describe the measures taken by the Canadian government regarding immigration. The third learning intention is to indicate the economic situation in the 1870s. The success criteria is, I can describe the economic situation in the 1870s. The fourth learning intention is to indicate the relationship between business and government. The success criteria is that I can describe the actions taken by businesses to influence the Canadian government. And the final learning intention, there's actually 5, is to explain the solution of the Canadian government to the economic situation. And the success criteria is that I can explain the proposed solution by the Canadian government to the economic situation. The economic situation in the 1870s was one of a depression. It was known as the Long Depression and should not be confused with the Great Depression that's more famous that happened during the 1930s. So a depression is a period where the economy falls, and it's usually characterized by a reduction in the economy of 10% or more. And it has to last for a long period. So there's no precise definition of what depression is, but generally it's accepted by economists that a depression has to last at least 2 or 3 years. Now, in this case, the Long Depression occurred from 1873 to 1879, and technically it was actually just a little bit longer than the Great Depression, although the effects of the Great Depression were maybe much more felt. The Prime Minister at the time was the first Prime Minister, John Macdonald here, and he was a conservative. Now, part of the deal in bringing British Columbia into Confederation and making it a province was to promise to build the railway to the Pacific. Now, in doing so, Macdonald got into a little bit of trouble because he was, corrupt. And what happened was this became known as the Pacific Scandal. So we have the Canadian Pacific Railway here. They were the company that wanted to win the contract to build this railway, which would have been very, very lucrative for them. And what they did is they ended up paying for the Conservatives' re-election campaign. They gave over $300,000 to the Conservatives, which was a lot of money back then. At this time, the Conservatives were a majority in the government, so this is an illustration of the amount of seats that they have in Parliament. They have more than the Liberals, and they end up winning this election using the money that they got from the CPR. Now, the Liberals didn't take this lightly, and this cartoon here shows the Liberals on the left-hand side. That's them there. They were, trying to paint Macdonald with the tar, in this case, of the Pacific Scandal, and the Conservatives were trying to get out of it. What ends up happening is that in the next election, the Liberals win majority government from the Conservatives. But this isn't the end of John A. Macdonald. A few years later, he campaigns on what he calls the national policy. The Depression does the Liberals in. They don't have any solutions. This is John A. Macdonald's solution. So he has there's 3 main policies to the national policy. The first is to bring in a tariff. So the idea here was to put up taxes against the Americans, right? And in this cartoon is literally represented as a wall, and here we see the Canadian farmers and the Canadian workers are eating the profits of the national policy. Now, the next part was to bring in immigrants. They were promised free land in the West. The idea was to settle the West, and these immigrants would work in cities and factories, and also would get these free farms, so they would create, produce food for the growing cities. And the railway would be used to transport the immigrants to the West and transport the products back to the cities. They were able to fill the West through propaganda. So, you can see these scenes here, right? The Golden West, the, free farms. They advertised all over Europe. Now, the effects of the national policy weren't really felt until the 1890s, and ironically, a little bit later under the next Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But the effects of this were profound was the more diverse population. So as this cartoon here shows, that Canada is not just French and British, but it encompasses all kinds of different people. So we have Germans and Belgians and Russians and Austrians and Scandinavians, and everyone's coming together to become Canada. So that's one of the characteristics of immigration at this period, is the increased diversity. So we get Germans, we get Italians, we get Jews, we get Scandinavians. People from all over Europe are coming to Canada. Characteristic is the creation of new provinces. So in 1905, we get the creation of the last two prairie provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan. Thanks for watching this 20th video in the Flipped History series. When going over your notes, please consider the following essential questions. How did various measures shape the settlement of Canada? And how did the economy accelerate the growth of Canada? Well, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.